The throne room of the Valthari Empire had witnessed 10,000 humiliations. That was not a metaphor. It was a documented figure, maintained by the Imperial Archivist and updated after every audience. The God Queen Valora the Undying had personally overseen 9,847 of them, spanning 4 centuries of absolute rule over 11 star systems. She had watched generals weep. She had watched planetary governors crawl. She had watched species surrender their cultural identities, their sacred texts, their children's names, all at the foot of that obsidian throne. Beneath the light of 11 captured suns crystallized into the ceiling above her, she was very, very good at humiliation. The human standing in the center of her floor was, by every available measurement, the least impressive creature ever brought before her. He was approximately 1.8 meters tall, soft, bilaterally symmetrical in the dull, unremarkable way of most carbon-based mammals. He had arrived wearing what her translators described as business attire, a dark jacket, a cloth strip tied around his neck for reasons no Valthari biologist had successfully explained, and shoes that squeaked slightly on the polished floor as he was escorted in. His name, according to the manifest, was Delegate Marcus Osei. Former position, Junior Agricultural Liaison, Earth Unified Contact Bureau. Current position, apparently, the only human willing to make this trip. That told her everything she needed to know. The Valthari Empire had sent a formal conquest notice to Earth 14 months ago. Standard procedure. A 72-hour window for full planetary surrender. The signing of vassalage documents and the immediate handover of resource extraction rights. 39 species had received that same notice. 39 species had complied, most within the first 12 hours. Earth had responded with a counter-proposal. It was 17 pages long. It included amendments, a glossary of disputed terms, 3 appendices, and a politely worded note that the original document contained what the humans called several significant contractual ambiguities that would need to be resolved before any agreement could be considered legally binding. Queen Valora had read 4 lines of it before setting it on fire. The follow-up notice she sent was much shorter. No more negotiation. No more windows. She wanted a representative of Earth delivered to her throne room within 30 days. Not to negotiate, not to sign anything, to kneel, to demonstrate before the watching galaxy that humanity understood its place, and they had sent her this. A junior agricultural liaison. She almost admired the insult. Almost. Gosh. Marcus Osei had been briefed extensively on Valthari court protocol during the 6-week transit. He knew the approach angle. He knew the correct depth of the bow, 7 degrees, for species considered lesser, which humans currently were. He knew he was not to speak until spoken to, not to make direct eye contact with the Queen for longer than 1.2 seconds, and absolutely not to touch anything in the throne room. He also knew that none of this mattered because he wasn't here to follow their protocol. He was here to deliver a message. His government had been very clear about what the message was. They had also been very clear that whoever delivered it was unlikely to be invited back for dinner. He had volunteered. His colleagues at the Contact Bureau had thought he was insane. His supervisor had called him courageous, which Marcus privately understood to mean the same thing. His mother had cried. His daughter had asked if he'd bring her back something interesting from space. He'd promised to try. The escort of Valthari guards, 8 of them, each standing nearly 3 meters tall, their carapaced bodies moving with the fluid, mechanical grace of creatures who had been engineered over centuries for exactly this purpose, marched him to the center of the floor and stopped. The correct position. The kneeling position. Marcus didn't kneel. He stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, and he looked at the throne. A murmur moved through the court. 200 Valthari nobles, advisors, ambassadors from subjugated species, all of them watching, all of them suddenly very still. The God Queen herself had not moved. She sat exactly as she had been sitting when he entered, spine rigid, 4 arms arranged in the formal configuration that meant supreme authority in session. Her bioluminescent crown frills extended to their maximum width. She looked at him. He looked back. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 6. 7. You are not instructed to stand. said the Imperial translator. A hunched creature positioned at the Queen's left. The correct posture for your designation has been provided. You will assume it. I appreciate the guidance, Marcus said pleasantly. I'll pass. Another murmur, louder this time. One of the Queen's 4 hands moved, a gesture Marcus didn't know the meaning of, but which caused the entire court to go silent in a way that felt like all the oxygen had been removed from the room. She spoke. Her voice was layered, harmonic, the sound of several instruments playing simultaneously, none of them quite like anything Earth had in its orchestral catalog. The translator conveyed it in flat standard. You stand in the presence of Valora, undying sovereign of the 11 systems, breaker of the Kareth rebellion, she who holds the light of dead stars. You are a representative of a pre-contact species that has been formally designated as a tributary vassal of this empire. You will kneel, or you will provide this court with an extremely brief and instructive demonstration of what happens to creatures who do not. Marcus nodded slowly, as if considering this. I'm Marcus Ose, he said. I'm from Ghana, originally, though I've been based in Brussels for the last 8 years. I worked crop rotation analysis for most of my career. You'd be surprised how political fertilizer schedules can get. He paused. I have a message from my government. I was asked to deliver it in person, which is why I'm here. I'd like to do that, if that's all right. The court was completely silent. The Queen looked at him for a long time. Then she stood. She was extraordinary to watch, even for someone who had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment. Nearly 4 meters tall when fully extended, her body a tapestry of iridescent plates and controlled bioluminescence, her movements carrying the unhurried certainty of something that had never, in 400 years, encountered a situation it could not resolve. She descended from the throne. She walked toward him. Marcus did not step back. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he had to tilt his head back to see her face, and she studied him with the compound, multifaceted eyes that her species used to see across 9 distinct light spectra simultaneously. He was, he knew, deeply unimpressive to look at. No armor, no bioluminescence, no natural weapons, just a soft mammal in a suit that was slightly too warm for this room. Your species, she said, the translator murmuring in his earpiece, sent a junior agricultural worker to this audience. Yes, to deliver a message. Yes, do you understand what this audience was intended to represent? A demonstration of your empire's dominance and humanity's subordinate position. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. And you chose to stand. I did. Why? Marcus looked up at her. Because the message I'm carrying is easier to deliver standing up. For the first time, something shifted in the Queen's expression. Not anger, not yet, but something colder. A recalibration. She had humiliated creatures that commanded armies. She had broken beings who had held civilizations together through sheer force of will. She had never in 400 years had a junior agricultural worker look her in the eye and answer her questions like they were having a reasonable conversation. She struck him. Not with the full force she was capable of. That would have been immediately lethal, and she wanted the human conscious for what followed. But it was not gentle either. An open-handed strike with her primary arm, backhand across his face, carrying enough force to send a Veilthari guard stumbling several steps. Marcus's head snapped to the side. The court erupted in approval. A sound like 1,000 instruments struck simultaneously, the Veilthari expression of collective satisfaction. Then they went quiet. Because the human had turned his head back, he touched his jaw with 2 fingers, working it slightly, as if checking that it was still properly attached. A thin line of blood had appeared at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the blood on his fingers for a moment. Then he looked up at the Queen. And he smiled. Not the smile of someone performing bravery for an audience. Not the desperate, terrified smile of a creature trying to mask its fear. Something else entirely. Something that the Queen's 400-year-old pattern recognition had never catalogued before. The smile of someone who had been waiting. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. That's actually going to make this easier. Queen Valora had not become the ruler of 11 star systems by being impulsive. She had survived 4 assassination attempts, 2 internal coups, a civil war that lasted 60 years, and the absorption of species that had fought her empire to the last soldier. She was not, by any measure, a creature who frightened easily, but something in the way the humans spoke made the crown frills along her head contract involuntarily. It was a tell, a biological reflex she had spent 3 centuries learning to suppress. Her guard noticed. They said nothing. They were too well trained for that. But the 8 soldiers closest to the human shifted their stances almost imperceptibly, the Veilthari combat posture adjustment that preceded threat response. "You will deliver your message now," the Queen said, "and then we will discuss the appropriate consequences for your behavior." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket. 8 weapons were immediately raised. He moved slowly, deliberately, and produced a small, folded piece of paper. Actual paper, physical, Earth-manufactured, slightly crumpled from the journey. He unfolded it with the care of someone handling something that mattered. "This is a letter," he said, "from Secretary General Adiora Menza of Earth's Unified Contact Bureau. She asked me to read it aloud, if you're willing." The Queen said nothing, which, in this court, was permission. Marcus cleared his throat. "To Her Majesty Veilora, Sovereign of the Veilthari Empire, we have reviewed your conquest notice dated 14 months ago with considerable attention. We have also reviewed the histories of the 39 species who received similar notices before us. We noticed that in 37 of those 39 cases, the conquered species had no prior experience with the specific category of environment that the Veilthari military was built to operate in. We would like to draw your attention to a data point that appears to have been omitted from your intelligence assessment of Earth. Our planet's surface gravity is 1.0 standard. Our atmospheric oxygen content is 21%. Our average surface temperature range is -89 to +57 degrees Celsius. We have 7 distinct climate zones, 4 of which are classified by the Galactic Biology Consortium as extreme survival environments. We have active tectonic systems, frequent electromagnetic storms, seasonal temperature variance of up to 80 degrees in temperate zones, and a moon large enough to generate significant gravitational tidal forces. We are not, in other words, a comfortable planet. The Veilthari military, as best we can determine from public records, has conducted the majority of its operations in stable, temperate, Class 2 or Class 3 environments. We respect this. Your empire is large, your administration is impressive, and your military record is genuinely remarkable. However, we want to be transparent with you, as we believe transparency is the foundation of productive relationships. Earth has been at war continuously, in one form or another, for approximately 12,000 years, not with external enemies, with each other, and with our own planet. We have survived ice ages. We have survived pandemics that killed 1/3 of our total population. We have survived famines, floods, volcanic winters, and at least 4 separate near-extinction events that our own species caused through our own errors. We did not survive these things because we were strong. We survived because we are, biologically and culturally, almost impossible to discourage. We are not sending this letter to threaten you. We are sending it because we believe that what is about to happen can still be avoided, and we would prefer that it be avoided. The delegate carrying this letter has been authorized to negotiate in good faith, with full authority to sign any agreement that reflects mutual respect between our civilizations. We genuinely hope you will consider this option. If you choose not to, if you choose instead to harm our delegate, which we acknowledge is possible, please know that the action will be recorded, documented, and used as the formal justification for what follows. Sincerely, Secretary General Otto Rove Contact Bureau. Sincerely, Secretary General Otto Rove Karst means. Marcus folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. The throne room was absolutely silent. Queen Veilora stared at him. 4 centuries of sovereignty. 4 centuries of watching species crumble. She had never, not once, been handed a letter that read like a quiet, polite, thoroughly documented declaration of war, written in the tone of someone explaining why they were returning a defective product. "Preparing," she said slowly, "for 14 months. Yes, your species has been preparing. We're very organized when we need to be," Marcus said. "The agricultural sector in particular. We spend a lot of time thinking about things that might go wrong and how to respond. Drought contingencies, pest cycles, that sort of thing. It's a useful habit. She looked at him for a very long time. Then she looked at her general, High Commander Sathara, who stood to her right, a soldier of 60 years' service, a being who had personally overseen the subjugation of 4-star systems and never once shown any readable form of doubt. Sathara was looking at the human with an expression that the Queen did not immediately recognize. It took her a moment to place it. She had seen it once before, 40 years ago, when a scout team returned from surveying a newly discovered world, and the lead scientist had quietly told her that what they found there could not be classified using any existing framework. It was the expression of someone recalibrating everything they thought they understood. "What has your species prepared?" the Queen asked. "I'm not authorized to share the specifics," Marcus said, "but I'd like to point out that I volunteered for this assignment. I have a daughter. She's 7. I wouldn't have come here if I thought there was a serious chance that I wouldn't be going home." The crown frills contracted again. "You are either extraordinarily brave," the Queen said quietly, "or you are bluffing." Marcus tilted his head slightly, a small, considering gesture. "I've been asked that question before," he said, "usually by my daughter, when she thinks I'm making up bedtime stories. My answer is always the same. Why does it have to be one or the other?" What happened in the next 4 minutes had never, in 30 years of subsequent historical analysis, been satisfactorily explained. What the records show is this: the God Queen Valora sent a verification signal to her military intelligence division. A routine check. She wanted confirmation of what her empire actually knew about Earth's defensive capabilities. The response took 90 seconds. During those 90 seconds, Marcus Osei stood in the center of the throne room, with his hands clasped behind his back, and waited with the patient, unhurried calm of someone who had grown up farming a planet that killed you if you panicked. The intelligence report that came back was not routine. Belthari military intelligence had a classification system with 7 tiers. Tier 1 was negligible threat. Tier 7 was reserved for exactly 2 entries in the entire history of the Empire, both of which were natural phenomena that had been managed by avoiding them entirely. Earth had been initially classified as Tier 2. The updated assessment, compiled over 14 months of observation that Earth's government had apparently been aware of and had deliberately allowed to continue, was Tier 6. The report did not detail specifics in the public throne room channel, but it flagged 17 items of concern, each individually significant, and noted that the concerns were multiplicative rather than additive. That is, they did not simply add together, they amplified each other in ways that the Valthari military's modeling systems were still processing. Item 3 on the list had been highlighted in a way that the Queen's intelligence chief had never used before. It read, simply, "The humans knew we were watching. They chose what we saw." Queen Valora read the report in 3 seconds. She was a very fast reader. Then she was still for a long moment. Then she looked at Marcus Osei, who was standing in the center of her floor, quietly bleeding from the corner of his mouth, with the expression of a man who had waited 14 months for this particular moment to arrive and was in absolutely no hurry now that it had. And Queen Valora, undying sovereign of the 11 systems, breaker of the Karath Rebellion, she who holds the light of dead stars, understood something that no intelligence report could fully communicate. She had struck this man, deliberately, in front of her entire court, and he had thanked her for it. High Commander Sathara moved first, not toward Marcus, away from him, the 2 small steps backward that, in Valthari military culture, constituted a formal acknowledgement of a threat that could not be engaged through standard methods. It was a gesture usually reserved for geological events, for things you did not fight, for things you found a way to live with instead. The court saw it. 200 observers, trained in reading military body language across dozens of species, understood immediately what Sathara's movement meant. The guards nearest to Marcus took the same 2 steps back. The sound that moved through the court was not approval this time. It was something older and quieter, the sound of an assumption changing. Marcus watched Sathara step back. He said nothing. His expression did not change. "What?" said the Queen very quietly. "Are you?" "Agricultural liaison," Marcus said. "Junior grade. Technically still. They offered me a promotion when I volunteered for this trip, but I told them to wait until I got back." A brief pause. Felt like bad luck to accept it early. You are not simply a diplomat. I really am, mostly. I can show you 17 years of crop yield documentation if that would help. He paused. I'm also a first-generation descendant of parents who survived a famine. My grandmother walked 400 kilometers in 6 weeks to reach food, with 3 children, under the age of 5. She made it. All of them made it. He said it simply, without drama, as a person states a fact they consider foundational. Humans have been told we can't survive things for a very long time. We tend to find that motivating rather than discouraging. The Queen looked at him for a long moment. The strike I delivered, she said. A Veilthari guard would have required medical intervention. I'll have a bruise, Marcus agreed. Probably a spectacular one, actually. My daughter is going to think it's incredible. You are not afraid. He considered this seriously. I'm genuinely terrified, he said. I've been since I got on the ship, but I've noticed that being afraid and being capable of acting anyway are not mutually exclusive. Humans are afraid of almost everything, actually. We just do it anyway, usually. That's most of the reason we're still here. The silence in the throne room had changed texture entirely. It was no longer the silence of an audience watching a performance. It was the silence of 200 people trying to quietly update a very large number of assumptions simultaneously. Queen Valora descended the final step from her throne's base and stood at the same level as Marcus for the first time. It was not a gesture of equality in Veilthari culture. It was something older than that, a form of recognition that predated the Empire itself, used in the ancient records only in references to other apex entities. The letter, she said, mentions mutual respect. It does. Is that what your government actually wants? Marcus looked up at her steadily. Yes, he said. Genuinely. We're not interested in conquest. We have a very difficult planet to manage, and we're fairly busy with it. But we are very, very interested in not being conquered either. Those two things together leave us with one option, which is finding arrangements that work for everyone. And if I refuse, then I go home, and what happens next isn't up to me anymore. He said it without relish, without threat, the way a person describes weather. I'd rather that not happen. I've read the history of the species your empire has absorbed. Some of them were remarkable. They're not anymore. He paused. That seems like a loss. For everyone. The negotiation that followed lasted 11 days. It was conducted in a series of smaller chambers, away from the court, with translators and legal teams and the kind of detailed, clause-by-clause argumentation that Marcus had apparently been trained for through 17 years of agricultural policy disputes. He was, multiple Veilthari advisors noted in their private records, extraordinarily difficult to out-argue. Not because he was aggressive, but because he was patient in a way that seemed structural rather than practiced, and because he never appeared to need the outcome to go a particular way in any given hour. Only eventually. High Commander Sethara requested a private meeting with him on the 4th day. She asked him directly what Earth's military capability actually was. He told her, equally directly, that he didn't know the specifics. He genuinely was an agricultural liaison, a fact that she had verified, but that he knew 2 things from his own experience. The first was that his grandmother had survived things that should have killed her, not because she was exceptional, but because survival was simply the operational mode most humans defaulted to when nothing else was available. The second was that Earth had looked at the Veilthari Empire's conquest notice, reviewed the history of 39 species who had surrendered to it, and decided that the correct response was 17 pages of contract amendments. What does that tell you, Marcus asked, about how we think about this situation? Sethara was quiet for a while. That you were not frightened, she said. That we thought we had options, he corrected gently. There's a difference. He paused, looked at his tea, which was a Veilthari herbal preparation that was technically not designed for human biochemistry, and which he had been drinking every morning anyway with no apparent ill effect, to the considerable professional alarm of the delegation's medical attaché. Can I tell you something? He said, off the record. Sethara's frills tilted, Veilthari body language for proceed. When the conquest notice arrived, There were people on Earth who wanted to comply immediately. Immediately. Within the first hour. Because you are genuinely terrifying and the rational calculation, looking at raw numbers, says you win. He held the tea with both hands. But there were also people who remembered that rational calculations have a way of not accounting for certain variables. The variables that make things survive ice ages. The variables you can't quite model. He looked up at her. Secretary General Mensa has a saying. A species that has survived itself is very hard to defeat from the outside. I think that's probably true. Cythera studied him for a very long time. Your delegate was chosen carefully, she said finally. An agricultural worker, someone who reads as non-threatening. I really was the best choice, Marcus said. I've also negotiated grain distribution for 6 countries simultaneously during a drought year. This is less complicated than that, actually. Fewer parties and nobody's starving. The treaty was signed on the 11th day. Not a vassalage document. Not a surrender. A formal recognition of Earth as an independent sovereign entity with provisional trade agreements and a mutual non-aggression clause that included a joint commission to review existing intelligence assessments. The Velthari Empire's understanding of Earth and Earth's understanding of the Velthari Empire, with the goal of reducing miscalculation on both sides. It was, the Galactic Assembly noted when it was filed with them 4 weeks later, the first time in Velthari history that the Empire had signed such a document with a newly contacted species. The document was called the OC Accords. Marcus hadn't asked for that. He'd found out when he was already on the ship home. He called his daughter from transit. She was 7, and the video call came through with the slight delay of deep space transmission, but her face appeared on his screen immediately. Big eyes, a gap where she'd lost a tooth 2 weeks ago, wearing a sweater that had been declared her favorite for 3 years and was now substantially too small. Dad, did you bring me something? I did, he said. I'll show you when I get home. Is it alien? Very. She pressed closer to the camera. Did anything scary happen? He touched the bruise on his jaw carefully. It was, as predicted, spectacular. A deep purple-green across his left cheekbone that the ship's medical officer had photographed for her records, with barely concealed scientific fascination. A little, he said, but I'm okay. Were you scared? He thought about the throne room, the Queen descending. The sound of his own heartbeat so loud he'd been briefly worried it was audible. Very much, he said honestly, but I had a job to do. His daughter considered this with the serious gravity of a 7-year-old processing new information. Grandma says, she said carefully, that scared and brave are the same thing. They just have different costumes. Marcus smiled. The bruised side of his face protested. Your grandma is right, he said. She usually is. 6 months after the signing of the OC Accords, High Commander Cythera submitted an internal report to Queen Valora that was classified at the highest tier of Velthari military intelligence. The report was short for its classification level. Most of it was a detailed analysis of the intelligence Earth had knowingly allowed the Velthari to collect, what they had revealed, and what they had chosen to obscure, and what the pattern of that choice implied about how Earth thought about the likely shape of any future confrontation. The final paragraph read, it is the assessment of this office that humanity's primary strategic advantage is not technological, biological, or military in the conventional sense. It is epistemic. They understand how to be underestimated. They have had 12,000 years of practice at surviving situations that should have killed them, and they have developed, across that span, a sophisticated cultural relationship with the concept of being written off. They are comfortable losing individual battles in ways that allow them to dictate the terms of longer conflicts. The OC delegation was not an oversight. It was a demonstration. They sent us the person least likely to be perceived as a threat, with a document that could only be properly understood in retrospect, and they waited to see what we would do. We struck him. He thanked us. He had already won at that point. We simply hadn't understood that yet. Valora read the report twice. Then she filed it under a new classification heading that she created specifically for this purpose. She called it Species Requiring Careful Ongoing Attention. Earth was the first entry. She suspected it would not be the last one she had to write. Marcus Osei returned to his position at the Earth Unified Contact Bureau. He turned down 3 promotions and 2 documentary offers. His official title remained Junior Agricultural Liaison for another 2 years, until a bureaucratic reorganization moved him sideways into a newly created position whose actual function was harder to name. He spent a lot of time reviewing first contact protocols, making suggestions, asking careful questions about what information they shared and when and how. His colleagues noted that he seemed particularly interested in what made something seem non-threatening. He took his daughter to school every morning. She was 8 now, then 9. She grew out of the sweater eventually and declared a new favorite. He kept the letter, the original printed copy, framed on his desk at home. Not the draft. Not a copy. The one he'd read aloud in the Valthari throne room, voice steady, with a queen's handprint on his face and 200 of the galaxy's most powerful beings watching from the dark. His daughter asked him about it once when she was 10. He told her it was a letter that had said 2 things at once. On the surface, it asked for peace. Underneath, it made something very clear. What? She asked. He looked at the letter for a moment. That we knew who we were, he said, and we thought that was worth saying out loud. She thought about that for a while. Was it? She asked. Marcus smiled. The bruise was long gone by then, but he still touched his jaw sometimes, absently, the way you touch a scar you've made peace with. The queen stopped hitting, he said, so I'd say yes. In the 30 years following the OC Accords, Earth signed 14 additional agreements with Valthari Spear civilizations. In none of those negotiations did Earth send a senior diplomat, a military official, or a figure of obvious political power. The Valthari Empire absorbed no new species during the same period. High Commander Sathara retired from military service 7 years after the throne room incident. Her memoir, translated into Standard, contained 1 chapter about the OSE negotiations. It was the shortest chapter in the book. It was the only chapter that was never publicly released. When asked about it in an interview, Sathara paused for a long time before answering. Some things, she said, are better understood slowly, and humanity prefers that you understand them slowly. That is not an accident. She said nothing further on the subject. Neither did anyone else who had been in that room.